their approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item of business is the report of the chair. Again, welcome to our meeting. Today we will vote on the second public funds payment to candidates in the 2021 elections. In the first public funds payments issued in December, the board issued more than $17.6 million in public funds to 62 candidates running for city council, borough president, controller, and mayor. The city's campaign finance program now provides an 8-to-1 match for small contribution candidates raised from the New York City residents. The higher matching rate, as well as other improvements to the program, were adopted overwhelmingly by referendum in 2018 and enhanced by city council legislation in 2019. More than 90% of candidates have opted for the new 8-to-1 program. This is a clear vote of confidence for funding city elections with small dollar contributions and public financing. Today also marks another disclosure milestone for 2021 candidates and the next opportunity for candidates to become eligible for a public funds payment. All 2021 candidates must file campaign finance disclosures with the CFB before midnight tonight. The reports filed today will be the basis for the next public funds payment scheduled for February 16. The next candidate disclosures will be due in March with frequent deadlines to follow until the primary election on June 22nd. Although the board will make 8 public funds payments prior to the primary election. Altogether, the board will make 8 public funds payments prior to the primary election. Normally, Naomi Zadro would be next to give a report on the work of the CFB's Voters Assistance Advisory Committee. Amy, is someone else going to give that report, or are we just going to skip that today? You're on mute, Amy.
We will skip that.
Okay. The next item of business is the report of the executive director. Amy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just lost my report. My computer died. I'm briefly going to report that the NYC Votes has launched its campaign to educate the public about ranked choice voting, which will be the method of voting for the several special elections that are happening this spring and for the June primary. We have launched a robust Train the Trainer campaign to work with community groups to train them how to discuss ranked choice voting with their communities. We are sending postcards to all of the voters in the various special elections in February and in March. And we have launched the information materials on our website, both ranked choice voting and a frequently asked questions portion of our website. And also we are busy working on materials for our voter guide and additional materials to educate voters about the new voting system that will be for most people in effect for the first time for the June primary.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the announcement of campaigns and compliance. The following candidate from the 2017 elections has completed the post-election audit process without any violations and penalties assessed by the Campaign Finance Board. The board recognizes the diligence of the candidate and campaign staff in running campaigns that maintain compliance with New York City's campaign finance law. This is not a first-time candidate. The candidate is Helen Hines, who was a candidate for City Council District 17. The next item on our agenda is a vote on the 2021 pre ballot payments. Amy, would you like to tee that up, please?
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair Schaefer. I'm happy to announce that 13 candidates have qualified for today's public funds payments, the second payment released for the 2021 elections. To be eligible for payment, each candidate has demonstrated support from within their community by meeting a two-part fundraising threshold based on small contributions from city residents. Furthermore, the campaigns have provided documentation showing that they're complying with requirements in city law. Notably, there are 4 candidates receiving a public funds payment today who have never received public funds payments before. In the first payment in December, 45 candidates received a public funds payment for the first time ever. This is a clear indication that the new 8-to-1 matching rate is drawing new candidates to run for city office. One city council candidate qualified to receive a maximum public funds payment of $160,444 today. These are the CFB staff recommendations for public funds payments to 2021 candidates. For the office of mayor, one candidate, Scott Stringer, $38,503. For controller, one candidate qualified for payment, Brian Benjamin, $952,162. For borough president, 2 candidates. Actually, one candidate, James Bramer, running for Queensborough president, $1,491. For city council, 9 candidates have qualified for public funds payment. In District 5, Billy Friedland, $950. In District 7, Maria Ordonez, $102,457. In District 9, Kristen Jordan, $160,444. In District 20, Sandra Ung, $2,546. In District 25, Shikar Krishnan, $380. In District 32, Felicia Singh, $760. In District 33, Victoria Cabranes, $52,410. In District 46, Mercedes Narcisse, $135,508. In District 49, Rante Ungalea, $1,687. And also in District 49, Kelvin Richards, $1,330. For this makes for a grand total for this payment of $1,450,718.
Sorry. Thank you. I move for the approval of those payments. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have 2 candidate appearances. The first is Mathieu Eugène. Is there a representative for Mr. Eugène on the line? I'm not hearing anybody. If there's a representative.
For Matthew Eugene?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I threw you with the French pronunciation. Okay. And is there a representative from the CFB staff?
Yes.
Okay. So for the way we proceed is the CFB staff will sort of tee the question up, and then we'll give the representative of the candidate a chance to make his arguments, and there'll be a little bit of back and forth, perhaps some questioning from members of the board, and then we'll wrap up and eventually go into deliberations after we hear from the next candidate to appear. So Ms. Persky, why don't you start?
Yes, good morning. My name is Bethany Persky, Deputy General Counsel for the CFB. Before the board is the matter of Matthew Eugene, 2017 candidate for City Council, District 40. The campaign was a participant in the program and received $100,100 in public funds. CFB staff is recommending that the board find the campaign committed the following violations and assess penalties according to the penalty guidelines: failing to report transactions, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting requirements, failing to report a transaction in a daily pre-election disclosure statement, failing to document transactions, accepting over the limit contributions, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, accepting a contribution from an unregistered political committee, failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, and making impermissible post-election expenditures. CFB staff is also recommending that the board find a public funds repayment obligation. The campaign is not contesting the alleged violations and penalties, but is contesting the public funds repayment.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to read your name on this very dark screen, Mr. Takani. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Schaefer, Executive Director Love Preston, members of the board. My name is Artyom Tagani. I'm appearing on behalf of the people of Matthew Eugene. As stated by board staff, the committee contests the board staff's final public funds repayment recommendation, and we do not contest the recommended penalties. The committee contests the determination of a single transaction, an $11,062 payment to the advance group in August 2017 for campaign mailing ahead of the September primary. Mailings are qualified expenditure under the board's rules in place during the election cycle. This particular mailing was made during the election year in the furtherance of the candidate's election in the primary, as evidenced by documentation submitted to board staff in January of last year. This transaction was previously incorrectly disclosed as a payment to Flatbush Prospect Realty, apparently as a result of the transaction being added in C-Smart under Flatbush Prospect Realty's vendor profile. To clarify to the board, the transactions, whether contributions or payments, they're added to the profile previously created for a contributor or vendor. The vendor may have been created just before adding it, or may have been created much earlier based on previous transactions. The exact circumstances of this particular disclosure mistake are not clear at this time, as the committee has not been able to contact its treasurer in the post-election audit process. When first disclosed, the record included the correct total amount, date, and check number on C-Smart. In responding to different phases of the post-election audit process, the committee provided an explanation for the discrepancy in the vendor names, as well as documentation supporting the explanation, including copies of the retainer agreement with the advance group, the invoice, canceled committee check, and the literature produced. The canceled check uploaded and provided in physical copy shows that the check number, date, and total amount match that included in the original disclosure, and the back of the check shows a cancellation mark naming the advance group. On September 6, 2019, board staff sent the committee an enforcement notice. This enforcement notice included an expenditure sample report created on September 5th, 2019 that noted that the transaction is not qualified with a note code of name vend. At the back of this report, the code key explained that name vend was a vendor name on the provided documentation not matching or missing, and directed the campaign to either explain the discrepancy and amend its disclosure to report the actual vendor, or to provide documentation to substantiate its explanation. On January 8th, 2020, the committee submitted a response to the enforcement notice, which included the explanation of the mistake due to a miscommunication regarding access to documentation uploaded to C-Smart. Not all of the documentation referenced in this response could be viewed by board staff. This was discovered almost immediately, or just as the submission was made. The board staff permitted the campaign to deliver paper copies, and included in these physical paper copies were the invoice related to the transaction on both sides of the canceled check and the literature produced. On April 14th, board staff sent the committee a revised enforcement notice. The ESR included in this revised enforcement notice was produced April 13th and included the name vend code in relation to the transaction. The back of the ESR had a code key that had identical text to the September 5th ESR code key, still asking the committee to explain the discrepancy and amend its disclosure. On August 26th, the committee submitted a response to the revised enforcement notice, and in the response, the committee referenced its earlier response and stated that the disclosures were previously corrected. Copies of the invoice, canceled check, literature associated were all uploaded to CSmart, and that as directed on the code key, an amendment was filed. This was in addition to the physical copies provided to the board staff back in January of 2020. On November 6th, board staff notified the committee that it had completed its review of the response to the enforcement notice. Additional details were requested and sent on November 18th by board staff, and that new expenditure sample report run October 26th included the same code key details and explanation direction for resolving as the September 5th and April 13th ESRs. On December 15th, board staff was notified that the committee wanted to appear to contest. On January 8th, I contacted the board staff to discuss the items that would be contested, and over the course of this conversation, board staff discovered that the expenditure sample report directed the committee to explain the discrepancy and amend, and in response to that, I once again sent the electronic copies of the same documentation that was uploaded to CSmart and was, sorry, somebody's knocking on the door, was uploaded to CSmart and was submitted as a physical copy in January of 2020. As stated, the committee has provided the board staff with documentation to prove that the transaction in question was a payment to the advance group for the production and mailing of campaign material ahead of the September 2017 primary, and the committee was invoiced by the advance group and made a payment to them.
Let me ask you, did you say that you amended the disclosure?
Yes, based on the instructions in the response, the candidate amended the disclosure and submitted an amendment virtually.
That amendment was not processed or received.
The amendment was done. Is the advance group, is either one of you can answer, disclosed in any disclosure filing? In other words, was the fact that the advance group was retained by disclosed other filing?
Yeah, this was one transaction in a series of transactions with the advance group.
So it wasn't a secret that the advance group had been retained by the campaign. Is there any issue as to that?
No.
It seems to boil down to a question of whether or not the disclosure form, the campaign responded to the request for further information and correction appropriately, except possibly that no amendment to the disclosure form itself was ever received. Is that a correct summary of where we are?
Well, it may be. There's two different issues here, and I want to clarify whether we're talking about an amendment that was submitted in response to the draft audit report or in response to the enforcement notice. Mr. Chagani, can you clarify at what time the amendment you're saying was submitted?
It's my understanding that the amendment was submitted. If it was not received, I assume that's a different issue, but it was my understanding it was a response to the revised enforcement notice in or about August.
Okay, so that would explain why it was not received, because we don't permit campaigns to amend their reporting after the enforcement notice has gone out. That is stated in the DAR, in the draft audit report, in 10 different places. As cited in the board memo, it says this is the final opportunity to amend your reporting. This particular transaction was also cited 3 different places in the draft audit report, and the campaign was instructed to amend its reporting at that time and was reminded that it was the final opportunity. There was an oversight, and what Mr. Chagani is referring to is the footnote in the expenditure sample that went out with the enforcement notice does instruct the campaign to amend its reporting to fix the expenditure. That's a boilerplate footnote that we just neglected to update. The text of the enforcement notice itself does instruct the campaign that they're not permitted to amend their reporting at this time.
But the notice, the enforcement notice, did include the statement. It said it was a mistake, but boilerplate. But
so the text of the enforcement notice says campaigns are not permitted to amend their reporting at this time. There was a footnote in an exhibit that did instruct the campaign to amend its reporting.
So I understand there's no question that the money, in fact, was used for the advance group. That's not an issue. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Takani, do you know why the disclosure report was not corrected at the time of the draft audit report?
The committee's had no contact with its treasurer, and the contact with the candidate has been restricted with a certain level of technical proficiency issues. So I would say just on that, I can't speak to, personally, I can't speak to the draft audit report portion of the post-election audit. I began my work on it personally on the enforcement notice, but it was, we have had a consistent issue with no ability to contact the person who actually made the initial disclosure or any amendments following that.
But the campaign did respond to the draft audit report, correct?
Yes.
Who
Yes.
who was the person who responded to the draft audit report on behalf of the campaign?
Vito Pitta, the
Who is that?
partner under which I work.
I see. So your firm was involved in the response to the draft audit report?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or statements or arguments that anyone wishes to make? All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to take this under advisement when we go into deliberations in a little while. So you guys can sign off or mute yourself. We'll now have the second candidate appearance. The candidate is, thank you very much. Candidate is Mumita Ahmed, who is appearing for Ms. Ahmed.
Good morning, Chair Schaefer. This is Jared Rich, appearing for Ms. Ahmed, who
All
also
right.
should be on the line.
Great. And Ms. Persky, are you also going to handle this matter?
No, that will be Associate Counsel Jason Yee.
Where is Jason? I'm looking for him. Oh, there he is. Okay, so you heard the prior procedure, so we'll do the same here. I'll ask the CFB staff to just sort of tee up the issue, and then the candidate's representative will have an opportunity to make whatever arguments he wishes to make. So, Mr. Yee, why don't you just start?
Good morning, Chair Schaefer, Executive Director Loprest, members of the board, Ms. Ahmed, and Mr. Rich. My name is Jason Yee, Associate Counsel for the CFB. Before the board is the matter of the January 8th public funds payment determination for the Mumita Ahmed 2021 special election for City Council District 24. The campaign has submitted a petition pursuant to Board Rule 709 challenging the determination. Board staff recommends that the board deny the campaign's petition and instead review the campaign's eligibility in the normal course for the January 22nd payment.
Thank you. Mr. Rich, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Schaefer, Executive Director Loprest, members of the board. I'm here today in support of Mumita Ahmed's petition for an immediate reconsideration of the determination of January 8th, which denied her campaign public matching funds. Mumita is a leading candidate for the City Council seat in the 24th District, where there's a special election in less than 3 weeks, February 2nd, 2021. Mumita is an immigrant from Bangladesh who moved into an apartment building 22 years ago when she was 8 years old. She lives in a 66-unit apartment building filled with Bangladeshi immigrants who over the years have watched each other grow. They might not be blood relatives, but the building community became close-knit as a Bangladeshi enclave. So of course, when one of their native daughters came knocking on the doors looking for contributions, they were more than happy to contribute to help their friend. Mumita and her campaign are a grassroots campaign, and that's the type of campaign that the public matching funds program is intended to help. However, instead of recognizing that Mumita clearly received many donations from her neighbors who live in her building, the board's insinuated fraud committed. It's insulting to the campaign and to Mumita personally for this to be alleged, when a cursory review of the contributions clearly reveals that the issue at most is a clerical error. By any count, Mumita's received more than enough donations to meet the matching funds threshold. It's our contention that the board has made an arbitrary and capricious determination in disallowing all 75 cash contributions made to the campaign while simultaneously acknowledging that at least 39 of the contribution cards are perfectly valid, notwithstanding similar handwriting and identifying information, and also took no issue with 9 other of the cards. So by disallowing the entire batch of cash contributions, 75 members of the community have effectively been disenfranchised for no reason other than clerical errors. Without public matching funds, the grassroots campaign will be put into a severely disadvantaged position. That's the matching funds program is intended and created to avoid and equalize. The campaign will be severely prejudiced by not having timely access to the funds that they're entitled to. The campaign had 44 valid credit card contributions. 4 other credit card contributions have now had verification info provided, which leaves the campaign 27 cash contributions short of meeting the threshold 75 donors. By the letter determination, the board conceded that there's no issue with 9 of the cash contributions, which leaves the campaign 18 short of the threshold amount. The campaign has now provided 48 verifications from cash contributors that was obtained very quickly over the weekend after getting a determination on a Friday afternoon. They got 48 verifications, have submitted it to the board, and these submissions, along with the previously allowed donations, make it clear that the campaign has met the 75 donor threshold level. Yet still the matching funds have been denied to the campaign. Here, there's less than 3 weeks left to go until Election Day. Without an emergency determination granting matching funds, the campaign's left in a significant disadvantage in these final weeks. So I implore the board to immediately review the additional verifications that have been submitted and to make an emergency determination that the campaign is entitled to matching funds. Momita's clearly demonstrated that she's met the threshold requirements and her campaign is entitled to have matching funds released forthwith. I thank you all for your time and consideration on this matter.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, would you like to respond?
Yes, so I think that the central issue here is whether or not we should be counting these cash contributions towards the 75 contributor threshold. Mr. Rich's central point is that notwithstanding these various irregularities in the documentation, they should be counted. However, that is exactly what is at issue here. When we're looking at the cash contributions, we invalidated many of them because of very strong similarities in the signatures on the cards. And we also had a number of cash contribution cards where not the signature handwriting, but the handwriting in the rest of the card was very similar to the cards in which we had similar handwriting for the signature, if you follow. So given that, comprised a vast majority of the cash contribution cards and the nexus of addresses for these cards, the Special Compliance Unit recommended that we invalidate all of these cash contribution cards, which is a standard practice of ours when we have this level of irregularity.
Mr. Richham, I want you to address that, but I want you to address it with this thought in mind, because you should know what our thinking, our tentative thinking is as we go forward here. So you've described a clerical error, but I think we see it differently. I mean, you have cards here which, based upon a comparison of handwriting, appear not to have been signed by the people who made the contribution. That in itself may not be fraud, and so I'd like to sort of tamp down the level of emotion that's connected to this. But it is a serious irregularity, more than just kind of a technical error. And so, the CFB staff was responding to what appears to have been evidence, and indeed the subsequent statements or affidavits that were submitted, handwriting indicates that you do have quite a number of cards that were not only filled out by the person who didn't make the cash contribution, which is fine, but was also signed by that person. So given the seriousness of that irregularity, that's what the CFB staff was responding to. So could you address that point?
Yeah, no, understood. Thank you, Chair. The campaign has submitted an affidavit of verification from Moram Pervin, who's the person who volunteered for the campaign, who did help, and it's admittedly so helped, whose handwriting appears on a lot of these contribution cards. His handwriting appears, it was as a convenience to the donors that he filled in all the information and had the donors sign themselves. He's affirmed that the donors have signed themselves. When you're looking at the cards, when I look at the cards, I see distinct signatures, and I see no reason to disallow 75 cash contributions in total when we really need only 27 of those contributions to be counted. I don't think that there's any, it seems from the letter of determination of the board from January 8th, it's conceded that 9 of those contributions have no issue. And it's also conceded that 39 of the contributions seem to have no issue with the signature. There was an issue with whose handwriting was in the identifying information. An affidavit's now been submitted showing whose handwriting was in the identifying information. And we just see no reason to disallow the entire batch of cash contributions when only a fraction of those contributions are needed to get to the matching threshold level. And what I'm asking the board to do is really look through everything immediately, only because of the time sensitivity of this, where we have a special election in less than 3 weeks. And sufficient information, follow-up information has been given to the board. What I don't hear any, we're saying that there's no allegation of real fraud and maybe it's more than a clerical error, but I don't hear that there's been any investigation having determined that any of these cash contributors are not real people. These are all of her neighbors. I mean, it goes against all sense of reason to suggest that there'd be anything wrong with a candidate walking around or having volunteers walk around the building that she lives in and getting small donations. We have an immigrant community with people with non-native, non-English, English as a second language or third language. So some of the signatures, you see some block lettering, you see where it wouldn't be traditional cursive signatures, but there's nothing wrong with that. Those are perfectly valid signatures so long as they came from the person, which we have evidence that they did. So the argument really is that by saying that there's I believe that the number that was used in a prior phone call was that since there were 10 of them that had irregularities, that the entire batch was going to be disqualified. And it seems to me that this is arbitrary and capricious on its face. And that since we have given an overwhelming amount of evidence supporting the veracity of the contributions, I'm imploring the board to just take those verifications into account and see that the campaign is well above, at this point, well above the 75 donor threshold, and not continue to delay the matching funds payment because it's a severe prejudice to a grassroots campaign to not get these funds.
Putting aside the procedural issue in terms of whether we're allowed to consider this information in connection with this petition, I'm looking at some of these affidavits. Is there a reason that they, at least the one I'm looking at, that they don't appear to say that they signed the card? They say it's from their own money, but at least the one I'm looking, maybe I didn't look at all of them, but they just say that it's from their own money. They don't say they signed the card. Is there a reason for that?
They used the form, the campaign used the form that they, I believe they got from the campaign finance board itself, and they used that verification form.
Is that true? Is that a form we give them?
Yeah, so if Are you referring to the affirmations in Exhibit 1?
Yeah, the affirmations attesting that they were the ones who gave the contributing.
Their money. Is that our form and it doesn't reference the signatures?
Yes. So the form that the campaign used to affirm the contributions attached to the petition, not the original cash contribution cards. Yes, these forms are from the CFB.
So we can't hold it. All right. So we can't really hold it against them that these affidavits don't reference the signature.
Well, that affirmation is, I mean, a standard one that we, a standard template form that we provide for whenever there is a question about the source of a contribution. It's not, we don't have a specialized template for when there's a question about signatures, although that is asked for.
What is that?
If I may I address a few points brought up by Mr. Rich? So first, Mr. Rich has said on multiple occasions that this has been an arbitrary and capricious decision. I would like to point out that in our written materials given to campaigns, as well as the script in the mandatory training that all campaigns have to attend, we say multiple times how important it is to ensure the authenticity and accuracy of the information on the contribution cards, including the signature. If I may quote from the training script, "I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to ensure the accuracy and authenticity of the information a contributor writes on this card." I would also, on the subject of non-native English speakers or readers, for what it's worth, this obviously isn't dispositive, but for what it's worth, we do actually offer our cash contribution cards in Bengali. I don't know if these particular contributors read or write Bengali, but given some of the statements around it, I think that may have addressed some of the issue with the non-native English speakers or readers.
As a candidate regards to that.
I'm sorry?
May I say something? My name is Momita Ahmed. I'm the candidate. I want to say something in regards to that.
Go ahead.
The translations that you provide to our community is wrong. And we actually sent an email to the CFB about it, one of our volunteers, that the translations aren't great. They seem like they were Google translated. There were no thoughts put into it. Our campaign is all about language access. And one thing to understand is that our communities, most of these people don't have separate credit cards or checking accounts. Many of them are unemployed. And so the translations are not sufficient enough, right? And we have been the ones to actually translate this effort to our communities, most of whom are first-time participants, right? And so I think that it's really, really important for the CFB, when having a grassroots candidates like me, to be a little bit more helpful in terms of like getting these things, making sure that it's proper instead of assuming like ill intent or fraud or things like that. I just wanted to address the fact that the translations itself is not sufficient. It's insufficient. So that argument is invalid.
Thank you for that contribution. That's very helpful, and we certainly want to look into the accuracy of the current translation. I just want to come back to, I think, what is the central point here. The CFB is all about promoting new candidates, promoting small contributions, promoting participation in immigrant communities. What we're dealing here with is an irregularity. Let me put it as a hypothetical. If you assume for a moment that a significant number of these cards were not signed by the person who made the contribution. While it may not be fraud, because they were, if they were in fact from their own money the contribution was made, the lack of a signature by the person violates a very important rule of the CFB. Now, we have an affidavit from the person who collected, who says that the individuals signed the signature cards, but we have the signature cards in front of us with signatures that all look the same, at least on some of them. And so it would appear that some significant number of these cards were not signed by the person who was making the contribution. Again, not to say that it's fraud, and it's not to say that that person didn't make the contribution, but they didn't sign, which is a violation of an important rule. And if that number is significant enough, then the enforcement staff's normal operation is to invalidate all while it investigates. So that's what's happened here. You've made two arguments, and I just want you to know that we've heard them. One of them is the purely factual argument that the person who collected the cards says that they were signed by the people, notwithstanding the fact that the signatures kind of look alike. But okay, that's a purely factual point. And then you've made kind of a policy argument as your second argument, saying, look, even if you discount the ones where you think the signature is a bad signature or is not the signature of the donor, there's enough other ones to qualify, which goes to the procedural rule that if the number is sufficiently large, they disqualify all of them while they investigate. So I want you to know that I hear you making two distinct arguments, and we've heard them both. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. If I may just say one point in response to what Mr. Yee had said.
Sure.
I just want to note that there's nothing that I found in a campaign finance handbook or in a campaign finance board rules or in the administrative code of the city of New York that supports the proposition that there's that an entire batch of cash contributions can be disqualified because of irregularities on some of them. And then Mr. Schaefer, just to your point, when I'm looking at them, I just do not agree. I see very distinct signatures on a lot of, most of these donation cards. And then in the verification forms, we've given 48 verifications, which were obtained over a weekend immediately to support the veracity of all these contributions and the signatures and the people and the existence of the people. And we're at such a level, where the campaign needs 27 of these to be valid out of 75. And again, I'm just asking for just the board to reconsider and look at the additional evidence provided and come to the determination that there has been sufficient donor contributions submitted with sufficient evidence, and the campaign is well above the 75 donor threshold.
Okay, let me ask this question of the CFB staff. If this petition were to be denied, this is purely hypothetical, I'm not telling you what our decision is going to be. If it was to be denied without prejudice to a determination that a future payment could be made, what is the soonest that future payment could be made? If you determine after you've finished whatever further inquiry you're required to do, if you conclude that the threshold has now been met and the payment the campaign is eligible for a payment, what is the soonest that could happen?
1 week. So this would be next Friday, January 22nd, which is the next regular payment date. And I want to emphasize again, we've spent a lot of time on the kind of merits and substance of this, but the main thrust of board staff's position on this is that this is a procedural issue. A 7-9 petition is not the appropriate forum for which to submit new documentation and information, and these are standard reviews that we have done in the course of our audit of the contribution cards. And the campaign is, of course, going to be continued to review for eligibility for next Friday's payment. And we audit and the special compliance unit are in fact reviewing the documentation that was submitted by the campaign for that payment date. That's already happened.
Good. I have one further question. I'm sorry if I'm monopolizing, but I've seemed to have been drawn into this because this is obviously an important matter. Mr. Lee, what is the response to Mr. Rich's assertion that he cannot find any written embodiment of the procedure that we follow, that if a sufficient number of signature cards, I don't know whether this is limited to cash contribution signature cards or others, appear not to have been properly signed, that the remaining ones can also be validated? Is there in fact any kind of handbook, manual, regulation, or other written document that embodies that practice of ours?
Mr. Schaefer, I can't speak to a specific citation about a batch invalidation as such, but I can say that in multiple places in the handbook and the rules, we state very clearly that not only do we have to get the cash contribution cards, but we have to have them with a certain level of certainty of authenticity.
Let me ask a question. If I don't remember the numbers, but if you said we're not going to disqualify 100%, I'm just asking this hypothetically, but we are going to disqualify, at least for the moment, any of the ones that we had a question about the signature, would they have qualified?
Yes, so the campaign would have met threshold. The concern at the time from board staff is that the handwriting on the invalid similar signature cards, it appears that that same individual who Mr. Rich points out in the petition and exhibits point out is one individual, Moram Pervin. That individual also filled out these other cards that don't appear to have the same signature, but all the handwriting completing the information is the same, and that it calls into question.
That's permissible, but that's permissible under the rules for somebody to fill out the card, right?
Yeah, it is permissible so long as the signature, no information is altered after the signature.
Right, but so here's the point. It would appear, and Mr. Rich, you need to be aware that we're constrained to view this as of the date that the cards that were submitted to the CFB staff. I mean, in a sense, the new information that you've brought to our attention is quite relevant for the next payment cycle. But in terms of your petition to change the determination that was previously made, we're constrained, it would appear, to view it on the basis of the information that was before the staff as of that date. However, as Mr. Davis's question pinpoints, even the question is, even viewing it as of that date, if there were, let's suppose what had happened here, and I understand this is inconsistent with the statement being made by Mr. Pervin, but assume we were to say, you know, what really probably happened here is that he went around quite validly collecting these signatures, filling out the main body of the cards for these other people, which is all fine and according to our rules. Most of the people signed their own signatures, but some number, either because he was in a hurry or for whatever reason, and I'm not saying this is our finding, but I'm just saying, supposing he signed for them, not with any fraudulent intent, but maybe because he was in a hurry or he was trying to get the job done. And the number that he signed, which he shouldn't have signed for them, still leaves enough valid ones to have met the threshold. Your argument is essentially that in these circumstances, even if we conclude that those were not valid signatures by the donor, we should not apply the practice of invalidating the rest of the batch. Is that kind of a fair summary of your fallback argument?
And it seems to be conceded by the board that there are enough unquestionably valid cash contribution cards with unquestionably valid signatures and information that the candidate would have hit the threshold. So the real issue, you know, so we're all in agreement that she has enough donors. The real issue here is whether the board is able to just unilaterally determine that an entire batch of contributions are disqualified while acknowledging that a large portion of them are fine.
Yeah, but I want to be fair to the board. I'm trying to bend over backwards to be fair to you and your candidate. I want to be fair to the board too. Look, in a normal situation, if you get a bunch of cards and there's a significant number that seem to have the same signature, it does call into question and call for a closer examination of whether something potentially fraudulent is going on here, and might well justify a refusal to make payments on the whole batch. What makes this a little unique, and normally that's not such a big deal because you do the investigation and the next payment date comes and the payment, assuming all goes well, the payment is made because it's determined that, you know, it turned out not to be such a serious problem. What makes this a unique case is the fact that this is a special election and the time frame is so short, even though the next payment date is only a week away. But I want to be clear that I am not conceding, and nobody is conceding, that the board is not right in having this practice of throwing out a whole batch if there are enough questionable cards, because that is an enforcement technique that's an important and a valuable one. So I want to make clear that the board is not conceding that, and at least I, as a chair of the board, speaking just for myself, because I haven't spoken to the other members of the board about this, I recognize the legitimacy of that technique in most circumstances, but I'm also hearing your argument that this might be a unique circumstance because of it's a special election.
Literally half the time, you know, if a payment is made next Friday, she's lost 50% almost of the time to spend the funds. It's really an emergency situation here. So I'm imploring the board to really just, if we could look at the evidence that's been submitted and make an immediate determination and release the funds, you know, forthwith, it keeps the campaign competitive, and it keeps it's in the spirit of the whole matching funds program to do this.
I don't know how we're going to come out, but we hear you. Okay. So are there other questions or comments for discussion?
So if I may, Chair Schaefer.
Please go ahead, Mr. Lee.
And, you know, this, I think, will be my final point, is that, you know, all of this, all of these clarifications, the documentation, the information, you know, about the contributors relating to the same address because it's this close-knit community, you know, the points about it being filled out by the same person and then signed by the individuals, all of that information was not available at the time we made the determination. Now, Rule 709, the whole idea is that the determination at the time using the information and documentation available to board staff was incorrect. So
But if I may just follow up on that, at the time of the determination, enough valid signatures were, enough valid contribution cards with valid signatures that are undisputed, and have been conceded by the board to be fine. Enough of those were submitted at the time of the determination to have met the threshold number.
Let me ask a follow-up question if I could. Did I hear you say, Mr. Rich, at the beginning that the candidate lives in the building where all these other people live?
A lot of them. I mean, she lives in a building where a majority of these are from, yes.
They live. So you would have known that it wasn't, I mean, the information I'm just saying was available, that it wasn't, that a lot of these contributions did come from a place where she was likely to know people.
Precisely.
That is not new information, is what I'm saying.
Her address is not new information. And really, I just asked the board to, again, I don't see it. When I'm looking through the contribution cards that were submitted, I see distinct signatures. The closest ones that I see are some people sign in block letters rather than cursive, but I see distinct signatures. And I just
don't going to agree about the similarities with the signatures, Mr. Rich.
Okay. There's no point in arguing that. We all have eyes, and we will go, when we go back into deliberation, we will look at this carefully again. We've heard you both on this point.
Thank you. I thank you for your time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I think at this point we've heard from everybody, and we are going to go into deliberations. And so we'll be back presently. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Did somebody have something further to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I really appreciate everything that you all are doing. And as a candidate, I just want to say there's no Bangladeshi candidate, a city council person or a legislator in New York State, even though there's 400,000 of us in New York City, and my district has the highest percentage of South Asian population, many of whom were not, went through so much during the pandemic. We are in the red zone in the district. Many of our neighbors, we had to go back to them. They had COVID, and we took risks in order to get those affidavits filled out. So I understand that the board has procedures, and that's important. But I really implore that you look at the circumstances and the obstacles that people like me face when doing this kind of work. And these are, at the end of the day, small contributions. And I just want you to, have that perspective.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to now go into deliberations. We'll be back in a little while. Bye-bye.
all the board members are here if the chair is ready.
Oh, all right. Okay, so the board has deliberated at length, as you can note, and we'll take it in the order of appearances. And I think we're going to vote separately on these two matters. So the first is Eugene Matthew, City Council candidate for District 40 in the 2017 elections. Although there was only a partial challenge, I need to go through all of the penalties, etc. And so the board proposes to make the following findings of violations and impose the following penalties and/or repayment obligations. 1, failing to report transactions, $3,327. 2, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting requirements, $229. Sorry, I've got to get this closer so I can see it. 3, failing to report a transaction in a daily pre-election disclosure statement, $250. 4, failing to document transactions, $468. 5, accepting over the limit contributions, $312. 6, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, $1,912. 7, accepting a contribution from an unregistered political committee, $125. 8, failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, $1,385. 9, making impermissible post-election expenditures, $2,709, for total penalties of $10,717. With respect to public funds repayment, the board finds that obligation to be 0. And therefore, the motion is to impose total penalties of $10,717. I will move the approval of that. And is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Just give me a minute to get back onto my agenda. 1 second, please. Okay. All right. With respect to the motion, or the petition rather, of candidate Momita Ahmed, I make the following motion. The board denies the petition. Without prejudice to consideration of the payments in the next payment cycle. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? The motion carries. We also have a motion with respect to a 709 petition from James von Bremer. This is a motion to ratify an emergency determination that I made as chair. So Amy, you want to tee this up and let someone else make the motion?
You're on mute.
Sorry. After the December 15th payment, the Van Bramer campaign filed a 709 petition. The staff reviewed it, recommended to the chair that he approved that petition, and we're asking the board to ratify the chair's decision.
So moved.
I think we need to call for a vote. I think the chair is on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Next, we have to ratify two 2021 payments. Amy, you want to deal with those?
Yeah. As a result of that, that 709 petition from Van Bramer, the staff recommended to the chair that he approve a payment to the Van Bramer campaign. In the course of reviewing the error that was our attention was drawn to by Van Bramer, we discovered an error in a different candidate. So on December 21st, the chair authorized in the board, the staff made payment to Eric Adams in the amount of $10,450 and the James Van Bramer campaign of $393,785. And we're asking the board to ratify those petitions, those payments, sorry.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion carries.
Next, we have, we're asking the board to ratify the chair's decision for issuing payments in the 2021 A special election. These payments were issued on January 8th. Sharma Deepti, $93,189. James Canero, $132,572. Jane Nita, $135,375. Dilip Nath, $135,375. Soma Syed, $128,113 for total payments of $624,624. We ask the board to ratify the chair's decision.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, and Bethany, we have some rules to adopt.
Yes, thank you. On November 19th, 2020, the board adopted for public comment several proposed amendments to its rules. The proposed amendments were published in the city record the same day. On December 21st, 2020, the board held a public hearing on the amendments. No one testified at the hearing, and the board did not receive any public comments on the proposed amendments. CFB staff is recommending that the board adopt these amendments to the rules regarding candidate and committee registration and certification, committee termination and closure, post-election and post-termination disclosure statement filing requirements, resignation and removal of committee treasurers, records retention, public funds payments and repayments, increases to the expenditure limit and public funds maximum in the event of delayed or postponed elections, and text message disclosure requirements for candidates and independent vendors. These amendments are being made to ease administrative burdens on campaigns by eliminating duplicative filings with the New York State Board of Elections, facilitate the resignation or removal of committee treasurers, enable the board to respond effectively to public health or other emergencies requiring the delay or postponement of elections, clarify the required disclosures within text message communications, and improve the administration and efficiency of the public matching funds program. If the board has any questions about the staff's recommendations for proposed additions to the board rules, I would be happy to answer them. If the board is prepared to act, the board staff recommends that the board adopt the proposed amendments to the board rules as final.
I move their approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. I think that we are now done with today's business. I will move to first go into executive session for some discussion, but no action items. And then to adjourn directly from the executive session. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Our meeting is now over. Thank you very much.